Good afternoon and welcome to this service of worship and remembrance for the life and witness of Michael Allen Jackson. God meets us in this place, not just this place physically, but this place spiritually. God promises that we will not be alone in the pain of our loss. We come together as friends and family to reaffirm our faith in God's unfailing goodness and to commend Him to God's everlasting care. As a service of celebration and remembrance, we come together to lean on one another and to lean on God as we remember this child of God. Let us pray. Gracious God, your steadfast love endures forever, your faithfulness to all generations. Trustworthy in all your words, gracious in all your deeds, we ask you now to make us keenly aware of your presence with us today. We need you to come to us in our grief. Speak to our hearts words of comfort. Touch us with the promises contained in your word. Enfold us with the people gathered today and all who share our loss. Fill us with the joy and peace that comes only from you. In the stillness of this time, we know you are here, O God, and we give you thanks and praise. It is in the name of Christ our Savior that we pray. Amen.
A reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 6 through 8. Therefore, we are always confident and know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. For we live by faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord.
Okay, she told me she was not going to do well, so now I feel a lot of pressure. John 14, 1 through 3. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike's son, Matt. There's a lot of people here who knew my dad when he was kind of at his height of speaking, so most of you know that he probably would have started this with a joke. I don't know where he'd find it in the pre-internet days, but he'd find some joke to tell that was appropriate for the occasion, was funny, and then he'd kind of weave it through his entire speech. He'd give the whole thing meaning, and then he'd come back to it at the end, close it. It would be amazing. He was just a magician with words. One of my favorite memories of my dad was probably when I was 10 or 11. He was speaking as a keynote speaker at a conference in Peoria, Illinois, and he took me with him. And we got to fly on a little teeny tiny private plane, and I got to sit in the co-pilot seat and put my hands on the controls, and it was probably the best day of my life at that point. We get to this conference, and my dad is basically a celebrity. His posters everywhere, his name's on the agenda, his pictures everywhere. People are coming up to him, shaking his hand. Like, it was a big deal. As a kid, it was amazing to see my dad that way. The convention was a lunch, and then he got up as the keynote speaker. So we're sitting at the lunch eating, and I look over, and he's scribbling. And I lean over and I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? He ignores me. So I look over further, and I see that he's making his outline for his speech. He's the keynote speaker. He gets up 10 minutes later, no more than 10 minutes later, delivers a 30 to 45-minute speech, which obviously started with a joke, and he killed it. He got a standing ovation from the entire crowd. He was just so charismatic. Although sometimes he was flying by the seat of his pants, for sure. Alzheimer's, unfortunately, has the downside of making recent memories of somebody so different than who they really were. So I am glad to be able to talk a little bit about who my dad was. Excuse me. My dad was a very emotional guy, and I did get that from him too. So as I get started, I do want to first say thank you to Kathy and her entire family for all the enormous love and affection you showed my dad. He was so lucky to have all of you. My dad was so accomplished. He met presidents, he met heads of state, he was the G.A. Ross Award winner at Purdue. He started a company while at Purdue that was ultimately very successful. But to me, he was just my dad. He was just another guy. And the scale of his accomplishments didn't really start to set in for me until I was on my own, until I was at Purdue on my own. And I started to realize just how amazing it was what he had done. I mean, if I tried to start a consulting firm while still at Purdue, unless you were asking me about college football or drinking games, I probably wasn't going to be very good at talking about it. But he did that, and people paid him for it, and it was successful. It was just incredible. And I think his success really came from a few things that made him really who he was. He was the most optimistic dreamer you'll ever see. He thought he could do anything. He thought everybody around him could do anything. He'd be mad if I said this here, but sorry, Dad. He told me multiple times he'd be the president, or at least he could be the president, given his connections. Truthfully, if a few things go a little different, he doesn't get sick, I would not have put that past him. He could have done absolutely anything. I see a lot of head nods from people who knew him well in those days. And beyond just being a dreamer, he really worked. I mean, he worked so hard. Probably the hardest working person that I ever knew. I mean, he was up every day at 4 a.m., filled his entire day, every day, relentless, because he wanted to make all those dreams a reality, more than anybody else I know. And then finally, he was a kid at heart. My dad was always fun. In his memory care facility, that's what he was known for being fun. He's always been that way. And when I was a kid, he was obviously so busy, but the one thing that you could always count on him to do is if I wanted to go play outside, shoot around, he'd be there with me. And probably some of my best memories of my dad were making up silly games at home. We made all kinds of games. I actually think we invented the floor is lava, where you pretend that you can't step on the floor. I really do think we invented that independently. People still play that today. And, you know, as you'd expect, it wasn't always easy to have a dad who was so accomplished. He pushed me really, really hard. He had super high expectations for me and my siblings, obviously. And I remember I was getting inducted into an honor society at Purdue for 12 seniors. So while congratulating me, my dad said, well, I think you need to get published now as an author in an academic journal. That would really kind of round out your Purdue career. And I rolled my eyes at him for sure. I mean, I'm sure I rolled my eyes at him. And, you know, setting out in my own life at 21 or so, I don't think I ever really intended to be, I'm going to be just like my dad. Not that I didn't want to have any of his skills or strengths, but it wasn't certainly my goal. Now, 15 years later, I'm a dad in my own career, and I see all these ways that, you know, things I've learned from him, ways that I do want to be like him. Sorry. And I'm so glad for those things. So I'm the proud dad of 3 little boys now, Christopher, Luke, and William, who are all here. Every time my dad gave a speech, if I was there, I was in the speech in some way, shape, or form. And I would guess if you asked them what their favorite thing about their dad is, it's my silly games. I always come up with some stupid game, whether we're in the pool or at home. And I think I got that from my dad. I got that kind of childlike, fun spirit from him. Second, I have no aspirations to be the president, but I have very high standards for myself. I push myself really hard, and I could talk your ear off about all the things I think my children should be capable of. Got that from my dad. And then finally, I am always telling the boys that they need to grow up to be kind, strong, and hardworking men. And we definitely believe in our family that hard work is the first ingredient to success. And that got from my dad. I'll end with another quick story. So every year when I was a kid, we'd go on a fishing trip to Canada for a couple days. It was probably my dad's favorite thing in the world. It was only like 3 days, and I think it was truly the only 3 days that he completely disconnected from everything else and just kind of did what he wanted to do with his family. Dad was very impatient. I got that from him too. So we didn't like to fish just to like be on a boat. Like he wanted to catch fish. So we went to lakes where nobody fished. There were lots of fish. And one particular year, we went with Dave Downing and his family. One particular year, it was scorching hot. So that meant we were sweating in a tiny little boat and there were no fish. So not exactly what we would have all had in mind. And day one goes by terrible. Day two of no fish and sweating. And he spontaneously decides to start a water fight between the different boats. We spent the rest of the day having a water fight instead of fishing, and that's probably my favorite day of fishing that we ever went to. And it's just the epitome of who he was. He was such an optimist, nothing could get him down. Like this was the one time a year he wasn't doing, productive things, and it all went wrong, and that didn't mean anything to him. He was just fine to find another way to have fun. So I think Dad would conclude, apart from referencing his original joke, he'd conclude with some kind of a call to action. Every speech of his always ended with a call to action. His vows with Kathy ended with a call to action. And I think what he'd say is he would want all of us to remember him for who he was in his good times. And then to everybody that he loves, he would say, you need to keep dreaming big and work hard for those dreams. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I know your dad's very proud of you. So thank you all for coming today to celebrate Uncle Mike. I think the only thing he would like better than seeing all of you in this room, or than being here to share with you how important you were to his life. People were Mike's life, and building relationships and sharing wisdom and dreaming dreams were fundamental to who he was. My name is Todd Morris, and I'm Mike's nephew. For 52 years, he's been my idol. I'm actually his oldest sister Doris's baby son, and so that's how I connect in the family. So you're going to hear a lot about Mike Jackson today, and I don't want to talk about his accomplishments in Purdue and all of ABD and all that. I want to go back to where it all started. I want to go to the beginning of the story. So Mike was born on a snowy Christmas Eve in 1954 in rural Tipton County, Indiana, to Hovey and Oline Jackson. Boy, was he their pride and joy. He had 3 sisters, ages 20, 18, and 16. So that's right, my mother, Doris, actually delivered her youngest brother with her mother and got the opportunity to go tell Hovey, you finally have a son, after 3 girls. With 3 sisters that much older, you can imagine the amount of mothering that went on in that family and why Mike may have had very high standards, because there was nothing getting past anyone with all of them around. Mike built his roots in these early years in unique ways. I consulted with my mother, who's in Florida. She's on video right now, and so Mom, thank you for giving these notes. Mike walked and talked early. I'm sure you're really surprised at that. He became an uncle at age 4, and by the age of 14, he had 7 nieces and nephews. And while he was an uncle to all of them, to many of them, he was like a brother because of the proximity in age. But I think this was the beginning of his roots in leadership. He had to be a leader of a family, even at a young age, with all of those siblings and all of those nieces and nephews. He was a leader from the beginning. And he developed all of these roots on the family farm. And Matt, you touched on the value of hard work on this farm. If I could just share how hard this family farm worked. To rise early, to care for the livestock, to tend the crops, but more importantly, to dream big dreams and to take risks to get there. Mike's parents, Hovey and Oline, came to Indiana with $8 in their pocket on a livestock truck from Kentucky, seeking a better life and a dream. They learned to be positive. My grandmother, Oline Jackson, who had a lot of colloquialisms, used to say, "You're an American, not an American't." Anytime we'd say, I can't do that, she would just say, double down, try harder. On the farm, Mike also learned how to run cross country and track. And notably, this is because he was being chased around the barnyard by the rooster. My mother vividly remembers Mike running around the barnyard with the rooster chasing him. That's the way I learned to run. Mike also developed his roots in education with a strong desire to learn and take in all that he possibly could. And not surprisingly, he excelled in school from a very early age. In fact, in first grade, his teacher recognized him for it. She said, Mike, we know you're very smart, but you don't have to toot your own horn. Let other people do that. Astutely, Mike pointed out to her, I don't even have a horn. But he learned the lesson of it's important to be smart, but have some humility and have modesty in it. And he learned that in first grade. In Tipton, Indiana, Mike also developed his roots in faith. He attended Sunday school regularly. He sang in a children's choir, and he actually frequently had solos. He was baptized at age 12, and he was very active in his church youth group. But more importantly than all of those, Mike developed his roots of family. For support, where Grandma Jackson would have family dinners of fried chicken, green beans, and tomatoes, all out of the garden. And yes, she would actually wring the chicken's neck. So we're talking the farm here. But this commitment to family, no matter where Mike went, it was never far. Family was always essential to him. He had very tight relationships with his sisters and their families. In fact, my mother tells stories that because Grandma and Grandpa could never leave the farm, Mike would often join. And his first fishing trip was with them, where he learned to clean his very first fish and put in his first line. But this family is also where he learned and discovered his wings. It was on one of those family trips to Washington, D.C., where outside the Capitol building, Mike looked at it, enthralled, and he said, I'm going to come back here someday, and I'm going to make an influence. That was at age 8. He developed his wings through 4-H, where he was a devoted 10-year 4-H member. He had a crazy good green thumb in growing vegetables and flowers, and he loved competing, but only if you could win the grand champion. Grandma had instilled in us an extraordinarily high competitive spirit and set an exacting standard of what was acceptable, to the point that every ear of corn that you would put on the judges' table had been pre-misted and desilked to ensure that it was perfectly aligned of every kernel of corn, and if not, you would start all over. The curing of the onions would take months in a dry house to have the perfect finish. So while grandmother finished an 8th grade education, her standard, her ambition, and her excellence expectation was unwavering. Mike also excelled and built his wings in sports, where there he was not the star. He wasn't the nationally gifted athlete, but he was an exceptionally gifted teammate who would encourage others and note talent in others and encourage them on. He went to Boise State, where he also discovered his wings. He was the delegate for our school, but he was also elected governor, where he found his leadership ability and his public speaking to make an impact. And then finally, with FFA, he found his full wings, his natural gift for engaging with others, truly caring, developing leadership, as well as sharing those thoughts through his words and emotions. He was able to travel the world, meet presidents, senators, and make a big impact. But through it all, Mike was always loyal and generous to his family. Memories of countless family gatherings, epic Easter egg hunts, epic fireworks celebrations where I truly thought that someone was going to lose an eye, a limb, extraordinary Christmas celebrations. By the way, Mike's birthday was on Christmas Eve, so I think he liked Christmas especially. And this is also where he got to be the center of attention early days, because every family gathering was Mike's birthday and 50 people showing up. Mike was always a sounding board for our family. He was always available for help or advice, which was sought often by all. Mike was an inspiration and a source of pride for all of us. He showed us that there was a way if you could dream big and work hard. So in conclusion, for Mike's humble, strong roots on our family farm in Tipton, he developed his faith, his character, and his foundation. And then he found his wings to fly and ultimately left a legacy, marked by dreaming big. We didn't plan this, by the way. Marked by dreaming big, working hard, helping always, and creating memories. So let me leave you with this quote that Mike inscribed on this book, which he gave to me on my high school graduation. So these are Mike's words. And in the call to action, I leave these with you as an inspiration. Dearest Todd, The greatest gifts which family members can bestow on each other are roots and wings. Roots to anchor, provide a foundation, and to frame a perspective. Wings to stretch, grow, and expand intellectually, ethically, and personally. Use your wings, don't forget your roots, and grow within the spirit of both. Love, Uncle Mike.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Vaughn, and it's an honor to be here today representing Mike's friends, honoring his extraordinary legacy. It was wonderful to hear Mike's family share just wonderful stories of love and admiration. It's great to see the grandsons here, and they'll be looking in and being able to follow on Mike's legacy over the years. Matt and Katie, you continue to be in our prayers as you continue to recall fond memories of your dad. And Kathy, your devoted caregiving and endless love for Mike just made his life so enriched. And I think this is the first celebration of life I've been to that there's all the social time before, and there's also going to be social time after. He would be so happy because he enjoyed so much time with friends. Mike and I became friends over a half century ago, 51 years this month to be exact. We were FFA section directors. The following June of 1973, while interviewing for state FFA office, we were matched together in one of the Purdue dormitories for several days. And it was during that experience that we became lifelong friends. During our year as state officers, Mike and I were often paired together for FFA events because we were both from central Indiana. And our one celebrity moment came during annual FFA Week media tour. With Mike's 4-H connections, we appeared on the WLWI-TV's Clover Power show. It was a youth TV talk show and was hosted by an Indiana native and local weatherman. Well, that guy later moved on to Hollywood, and in retrospect, we realized we were two of David Letterman's first talk show guests. Now, while our team of 6 state FFA officers were close, Mike, Scott McCain, Tom Davis, and I had a special bond. Mike and Scott served as national FFA officers. Mike and Tom were AGR Pledge Brothers. The three of us served national AGR over the years. Tom and I co-chaired Mike's student body president campaign. The four of us balanced a very fine line between being cocky and confident. And we were reminded of that many times by actives in the House and folks over the years. We took our turns at hosting annual golf outings, and yes, Mike would always have the lowest score. But then again, winning was an expectation for Jackson in all facets of life. He didn't know it any other way. Mike's talents were recognized by all. Back at the Purdue house, there were and many folks here today. Kathy, I had a list of about 8 or 10 guys who was going to be here, then it grew to 15, and then out there was 20, and I'd be here the rest of the day listing the names of all the folks from Purdue here, many folks from Agribusiness Group as well, and National Officer representation. So folks from all over the country, thousands of miles away, flew here, and many of them just down the road from West Lafayette. But there were so many good times and so much, as we know, we look to Mike with admiration. Many of you may not know that in the fall of '85, Mike and I co-founded Spectrum Communications. It was a Kansas City public relations firm serving national clients. And Mike's vision led our firm's strategic planning, and he was instrumental in attracting talent for all of our staffing needs. One of Mike's many legacies was advancing the careers of young professionals. I noticed so many postings on Facebook postings over the last few weeks of folks talking about how Mike gave them a first step in their career, and many of them went on to have their own entrepreneurial operations. Jackson was an influencer before the term was coined by social media. He influenced so many people in his lives. It's been said there are friends, there's family, and then there are friends that are family. And that was the case for us. Neither had brothers, only sisters. Another reason for our bondness. We stayed overnight at one another's homes as students and in adult life. Mike and I were at in one another's weddings and attended our parents' funerals. Life often gets in the way of renewing old friendships. When I learned of Mike's diagnosis of Alzheimer's, I reached out to Kathy, and Mike and I reconnected a few years ago. When I last saw Mike in July, I made 2 visits. The first day, I witnessed and experienced his progressed state of Alzheimer's. I didn't let him see me tear up, but after I exited to a nearby restroom, I wept. The next day, I returned, and along with Kathy and Connie, and that day, Mike greeted us with a big old bear hug and his infectious smile. The busyness of life can turn months into years and years into decades, but Mike would be encouraging all of us right now to take the time to reach out to friends from the past. In closing, I hope you will consider a memorial gift to the Michael Jackson FFA Memorial Scholarship Fund. It's a wonderful legacy that was envisioned by Kathy and Dr. Downey. C.S. Lewis once said, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." Mike recognized that many of us experience mountaintops and valleys in our lives, and I believe we can best honor his legacy with his positive outlook for life. He'd enjoy us enjoying time together today, sharing stories, and looking towards the future with great thoughts of Mike, and living his lifelong credo of the best is yet to come.
Hi, I'm Dave Downey, an old friend of Mike's, former professor of Mike's. And I'd like to, first of all, thank you for joining today in this celebration of Mike's life. He touched the lives of so many of us in so many unique ways, as is witnessed by members of his family and friends here already this morning, this afternoon, that I would agree with wholeheartedly. Although I had the chance to get to know Mike perhaps a little different perspective, multiple perspective for a long time. In fact, I had the privilege of knowing Mike for well over 40 years as well. And I'd like to share some of my own thoughts from the perspective that I had with Mike over the years. My first contact with Mike was when he was a student in my Ag Econ 331 class, Agri Sales, way back in the mid-'70s. I recognized immediately, and I don't know why it was immediate, but it was, there's something special about this young farm boy from Tipton, Indiana, where his mom and his dad and he raised tomatoes and soybeans and beans, and where he got some of those deep roots that you've already heard about, those deep Christian values that followed him throughout his whole life. And he even, I think, learned a little Spanish from those summer workers on his farm. In fact, I'll never forget that in the last few days when it was hard to get Mike even to kind of recognize what was going on, I said, "Mike, tell me something in Spanish." And immediately his life lit up, and he started jabbering quickly. I says, "Mike, do you know any naughty words in Spanish?" And then he really got going in that time. It was so much fun. You know, he went to a good school. My goodness. A good school that generated a lot of good people, had great teachers, especially VOAG teachers, who I think had a very major impact on his life. I think there were various different VOAG teachers at that school at that time. During his senior year, Darrell Bannerman, I think, and Alan Sharp, where people had a major influence on his life. And fortunately, one of those things seemed to be that they helped him understand that Purdue University might be a good place to continue his education. Yeah, I was impressed with Mike from the very beginning. I swear the guy had a photographic memory. I had never had a student before that could miss more classes and score as high as he did on all of those tests. I just don't know quite how he did that. And then Mike was elected as a state FA officer and took a lot of time from Purdue. Actually, I get acquainted with him a little bit later after he'd already been a state officer. During that time when he was in my class, we had a lot of conversations one-on-one because I was attracted by his personality and his experiences. He was just beginning to see his career at Purdue University unfold. And his experiences as a state FA officer had made a big impact upon him, and he was anxious to share some of those memories with me. And then shortly after that, he got elected to a national officer of the FFA organization, as has already been mentioned. And his job at that point, near as I could tell, was to go around the U.S. and, frankly, many countries in the world, representing the FFA, gaining and maintaining support by working with agricultural leaders at very high levels. In fact, just the other day, I accidentally ran across a picture of Mike in the office of the Secretary of Agriculture, my first boss, who was a professor at Purdue University for a while. And there in full black and white was Mike shaking hands with Earl Butz. No question, Mike was an impressive young man. While he was on campus, of course, president of Alpha Gamma Rho, he was very proud of that, and then elected as student body president at Purdue University. That's a big deal, and even ended up earning the G.A. Ross Award for the Outstanding Senior that year, an award that is granted on three characteristics: academic performance. Mike's grades were very good, his leadership skills that you've heard a lot about already, and his character. Those are the three fundamental things that earned him that G.A. Ross Award. And to this day, his name has been embedded in a monument in the heart of the Purdue campus for winning that award, along with the names of many other early people who were successful at Purdue. So I knew Mike also as a business partner. I remember, as it was almost yesterday, sitting with Mike in the office of Dr. Phil Scaletta, who was an old friend of mine, but also had been Mike's business law instructor on campus. And we signed the papers that Phil had drawn up to form a corporation we called Agribusiness Group. And in those early years, and that was just before he graduated, we'd formed that business in Indianapolis, and Mike began working very hard. In fact, he and his early employees worked their fannies off in that first 2 or 3 years especially, building relationships, developed training materials, traveling around the country, levering relationships, trying to convince agribusiness executives that it would be wise for them to invest a little of their money in training from a group of young college graduates from Purdue. How he was going to do that, I did not know. But he did it. He did it. And the people with him made that happen through his leadership. Even to the point where, in only a few years after that, there were some Harvard professors who also were consultants in agribusiness who got quite concerned that this young startup group from Indianapolis called the Agribusiness Group might be in conflict with the name that they had chosen for their company. And so we changed the name to ABG Inc. And from then on out, that's what it was called. But did you know, Mike considered getting a law degree. Shortly after we started in that business in Indianapolis, he got the idea that it'd be a good idea to get a law degree and go into politics. And he started taking courses in business law, or in law, that's right, business law. And that was going pretty well. He got pretty good marks, pretty good grades. It was going well, but he was so enthralled with the excitement and the thrill of creating an agribusiness consulting and training company that he finally decided, I can't take the time to do that. I wanted to devote all of my time to the kinds of things that will make agribusiness successful. In fact, today I wonder what might have happened if he had taken that route as a lawyer and going into politics, where he might have addressed some of the mess we've got around the whole country today in politics. But that's another story. We'll leave that one go. But I often wonder. I've personally found Mike quick-witted, humorous, articulate, a great public speaker that has been referenced already a number of times today. He spoke annually to literally thousands of young high school students, of FFAers, of Alpha Gamma Rho members, salespeople, managers, executives, leaving an impression wherever he went. I knew Mike as a co-author of a textbook called Agri-Selling, on several of the revisions of that. That book, published by our friend Lynn Henderson, who's here today, an editor and owner of Agri-Marketing Magazine. By the way, I understand that that textbook is now currently being used at over 75 different schools and universities around the United States, touching literally thousands of people each year. That's the kind of impact that Mike had in so many ways. I remember and knew Mike as a personal friend and a person who loved life. For example, I remember, like it was yesterday, it seems, and that happens when you get as old as I am, Mike sitting on the living room floor in our house on Sunrise Avenue in Lafayette in 1982, with his hands on the control of a new Atari game that we had just gotten, and playing Froggy and bouncing up and down, playing Frogger. I remember that so well. Having the time of his life. I wondered how in the world he'd ever developed the time to learn to play Frogger almost like a pro. And then there was the time when Mike taught Deb, my wife, and I to eat lobster. That was a time in the fall of one year in the late 80s when we were along with Mike and his wife, and we'd taken a trip to Bar Harbor, Maine in the fall of the year when the lobster season was all going on. And I remember clearly sitting in that Lobster Fest restaurant with a large pile of lobsters, about 2 foot high on a table is about 8 foot long, and Mike was sitting there with a bib, a white and red bib all the way to his waist, explaining to us that this was the way that you eat lobster. It was a great lobster fest. And the best part, Mike told us, was sucking the juice out of those little lobster legs where the really good meat was. That was the only way to really eat that delicacy called lobster. I don't think Deb and I will ever forget that time. It was not a pretty sight, but it was a memorable sight. I remember Mike as a sailor. Yeah, I remember Mike as a sailor. In the early days of Agribusiness Group, David Parker and I were with him finishing up a seminar with the Agrico Fertilizer Company in Tampa Bay, Florida, right on Treasure Island, and we'd been working hard for that 2 or 3 days. And Mike and Dave, the afternoon when it was over, said to us, well, clearly, says, you know what we should do? We should rent a catamaran boat. We've been working hard. We deserve a day, an afternoon on the Gulf of Mexico. And so we did. And there we were sailing around, and my job was to lay flat on that deck and not try to fall off that little catamaran, while my 2 Indiana sailors, farm boys who knew nothing about it, were demonstrating to me that they knew how to make the sails go to move that boat around. And all was going pretty well until we got some gusts of wind late in the afternoon, and I thought we probably would never get back to the beach on Treasure Island. But we did. Mike loved New Zealand. Special place for him. In fact, one time in the early 1990s, Mike and I had just finished up doing a seminar with Ravensdown Fertilizer when we decided to take an afternoon for a ride on the New Zealand's America's Yacht Club, America's Cup winner. And there we were together. Let's be clear, we were passengers. We were not part of the crew, but we were on that very famous yacht that had just won the America's Cup for the first time for the Kiwis, and in New Zealand, that is a really big deal. And we were having the time of our lives when there got some serious winds that came up, and we were asked to quickly move to the other side, upside of the boat. We could give it more stability with our weight so that it would continue to move across the Auckland Bay. That was an exciting thing, and I can't help but wonder if it wasn't something we did during that sailing on the catamaran 20 years earlier that might have made all of that possible. So we had a great time growing up together, and I say that because I was a part of that whole process. We did. That was a wonderful experience for family, wasn't it? It was because each year Mike would invite one of his kids at just the right age, whether it be Chris or Matt or Katie or Zach, along with three of my sons, Scott, Trent, and J.M. And our favorite place to go was a place called Canada North Lodge, a river system, about 60-mile-long lake in Ontario with only one lodge on the lake, and that made it great fishing, and Mike did enjoy that great fishing. So we had so many fishing stories we could tell. You wouldn't probably believe most of them anyway. I wouldn't if I were you. But we did have a great time, and one other time we were fishing on the Lake of the Woods, off of a near place called Kenora, Canada, Ontario, and it was raining that year. I mean, it was raining so hard, and it was raining so long that even though our favorite part of every trip was shore lunches and cooking those walleyes for lunch on an island and one of the islands in the lake, it was raining so hard that we had to call it quits at noon. But Mike insisted that we have that shore lunch. And so we cooked those fish, we ate those fish in the boathouse garage, surrounded by the odors of oil from the boats that they had stored there. And we were not going to give up that lunch in any way. And then we'd spent the full evening with his oldest son, Chris, demonstrated his Boy Scout skills at using duct tape to repair all of our rain gear for our last day on the lake. A very memorable experience with that young man. Mike did love family. He did love getting together with his family and friends. Christmas holidays were especially special for him for multiple reasons. He wanted to make sure everything was just right. And he was so passionate about things. He was passionate about his church. His church. He was passionate about his FFA. He was passionate about his Alpha Gamma Rho. And he was passionate about his business. And he loved supporting his church and Alpha Gamma Rho and FFA. I was aware that he made significant contributions over his lifetime to each of those, but more importantly, contributed himself in so many ways. I think that's one of the reasons Kathy felt strongly about creating a Michael A. Jackson Memorial Scholarship Fund in his memory. Might be a really good idea. It would allow you, if you'd like, to join me and many others to make a contribution to that scholarship fund for one purpose, and that is continuing Mike's legacy by helping develop agricultural leaders around the country and to continue that process. I think Mike would really like that. He was human. Mike had faults. We all do. But the Mike I knew was kind and generous almost all the time. He cared. He'd bend over backwards to help employees who might be going through a rough period of time, to his church when it might need something a little extra, particularly in its early years when it's getting started, and he happened to be on the board of directors of this church. Even to family members occasionally. 1984 happened to be a very special year for our family. That's the year that our youngest son, John Michael, was born. Mike's namesake, by the way. And that's when he was christened. And Mike and Kay were his godparents, and they were there. Yeah, Mike's well known for his skills and accomplishments, but I don't know how many times in my life I had to explain to my friends that my Michael Jackson was not the most famous singer of the era, but was in fact an Indiana farm boy, a Purdue graduate in agriculture, and most of all, my friend. One last thing. In 2019, Deb and I were accompanied by Mike and Kathy on a fabulous European river cruise. That was 4 years ago, and Mike was already beginning to outwardly express loss of physical characteristics, verbal skills, memory skills, but he was still Mike. He was still Mike, mostly. And together, Mike and Deb and Kathy and I were able to explore. We were able to tour, we were able to dine, we were able to dance, we were able to laugh, we were able to really enjoy each other. It was a marvelous celebration of life. It was a blessing for us all to have that last one trip together. But I cannot close without recognizing the role that his loving wife, Kathy, played, especially in Mike's final years. This cruel disease took from Mike gradually and then faster and faster, robbing him daily of more and more of the skills that made him so special and allowed him to touch all of our lives in special ways. It was Kathy's deep love for Mike, her caring ways, her devotion, that made the very best of every one of those last years, months, and days. Kathy, I know you did those things out of love. But I want to personally thank you for taking such good care of my friend, for making those last years and months and days as good as they could possibly be. Yeah, the world is a sadder place because Mike is not with us physically any longer. But Mike touched the lives of each of us in unique and important ways that we'll cherish forever. I'll miss you, Mike Jackson. Thanks to each of you for being here to celebrate Mike's life.
Last time would be the last time. I would have put off all the things I had to do. I would have stayed a little longer, held on a little tighter. Now what I'd give for one more day with you. Cause there's a wound here in my heart where something's missing. And they tell me that it's gonna heal with time. But I know you're in a place where all your wounds have been erased. And knowing yours are healed is healing mine. The only scars in heaven, they don't belong to me and you. There'll be no such thing as broken, and all the old will be made new. And the thought that makes me smile now, even as the tears fall down, is that the only scars in heaven are on the hands that hold you now. I know the road you walked was anything but easy. You picked up your share of scars along the way. Oh, but now you're standing in the sun. You fought your fight and your race is run. The pain is all a million miles away. The only scars in heaven there'll be no such thing as broken, and all the old will be made new, and the thought that makes me smile now, even as the tears fall down, is that the only scars in heaven are on the hands that hold you now. Hallelujah, 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 for the hands that hold you now. Not a day goes by that I don't see you. You live on and on the better parts of me, until I'm standing with you in the sun. I'll fight this fight in this race I'll run, until I finally see what you can see. The only scars in heaven, they won't belong to me and you. There'll be no such thing as broken, and all the old will be made new, and the thought that makes me smile now, even as the tears fall down, is that the only scars in heaven are on the hands that hold you now.
Thank you. Beautiful. Let me begin my short meditation this afternoon with a scripture passage that I believe describes the Mike that I knew. It is from Romans 12, 9 through 18. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in affliction. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Pursue hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be arrogant, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. In addition to what has been said about Mike from his family and friends, I want to add a word about his faith. Be ardent in spirit. Persevere in prayer. My first connection with Mike was in 1986 when I first came to Geist Christian Church. I served with Mike on the building committee for the first unit of this church building, what is now the Great Hall, where most of you entered the building this afternoon, where we'll have ice cream in just a few minutes in Mike's honor. That's Mike right in the center, and that's me with hair third from the right at the groundbreaking ceremony for the first building on this property. What I remember about Mike from those days, however, was not anything about the building committee. What I remember was how he helped me stay on a path to ministry. I was in seminary, and I was tacking together job after job after job to make ends meet to get through graduate school. One of those jobs was an overnight shift working at a front desk at a downtown hotel. It meant that I was working all night, going to school during the day, which left very little time for something called sleep. Even as a young man, it was detrimental to my health, and Mike called me on it. Mike saw my predicament and asked me to come and help do some odd jobs around Agribusiness Group. His idea was that I could come at times during the day around coursework and around my school schedule and give up the overnight shift at the hotel. I'm pretty sure he made up things for me to do, but he paid me for doing them, and it kept me on my ministry path. He made me feel a valued part of that organization. I see now that he was helping a student stay on track. His focus was helping me and ultimately the church rather than his own organization. I could never have envisioned in those days that I would be here in this place honoring a man who made an impact on a seminary student's path to ministry, but I am grateful. Mike began serving the wider church, our denomination of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, in 1986. It was in that year that he joined the board of directors of the Christian Church Foundation, the arm of our denomination that serves the church's mission through planned giving, endowment funds, and other avenues through which donors can charitably distribute their gifts within the church and the world. Mike became the chair of that board in 1991, and it was in that year that he was recognized here at Geist Christian Church with the Membership Recognition Award for being denominational leader. The February 20th, 1991 issue of the Geist Christian Church newsletter had Mike on the front page with the headline, Mike's 1 in a million. Meaning of the 1 million members of the denomination, Mike was selected to chair this denominational board. It was a year that was pivotal for the Christian Church Foundation, as Mike also chaired the committee for a new president of that organization. That president is here, former president and current president is here in the congregation. A process that he handled with grace. He served the foundation board on 2 occasions. In 1995, Geist Christian Church would celebrate its 10th anniversary. On that occasion, founding pastor Randy Spleth, who is here, wrote a thank you letter to Mike for his work on the 10th anniversary celebration. These are Randy's words from that letter. When I started Geist Christian Church, I did not envision its true greatness. Somehow I thought the size of the facility or the number in the congregation would be the indicator. Today I realize that the true test of any congregation is leadership. Randy continues, I count as one of my highest professional satisfactions your ministry with Geist and our close friendship. I will be eternally grateful for the way you serve, and most of all, the relationship that we have. As we stretch to meet God's tomorrow, I look forward to our shared ministry in Jesus Christ. Mike was baptized into Christ on Easter Sunday, 1965, at West Street Christian for his life. But he was a lifelong Christ follower. He was a lifelong learner. He was grounded in the understanding that Christ loved him unconditionally. Mike knew that that his God lightened our burdens in the tough moments and celebrates with us on the mountaintops. There were moments in Mike's life that surely tested his faith. One of those moments came in early 1975. Mike spoke of that moment in his final address to 20,000 people at the FFA convention in Kansas City. Mike, in his own words from that convention, tells us how he chose to handle the situation and how it became a mantra for his life.
To present his retiring address, "The best is yet to come," I introduce you now our National FFA Secretary, Mike Jackson. The best is yet to come for every one of us. Even when we face hard times, we all have trials and tribulations. We all have the kinds of things occurred to us that make us want to quit, but we can't. Back in January of this year, I had an experience that made me examine my relationships with others, my fellow officers, with all the FFA members that I've had the chance to work with. Both of my parents were involved in a very, very serious automobile accident. Right before the first board of directors meeting, when I found out about the accident, took the first flight home from Washington, D.C., back to Indianapolis, Indiana. And you know, the doctors couldn't tell me how badly they were hurt before I left. Now I'm here to tell you, I spent the worst 6 hours of my life waiting and imagining every possible consequence. That was one of the most trying times of my short life. It served one purpose. As I was riding all those planes and sitting in all those airports, all I could think about was where I'd been, what I'd done, my relationship with my parents and with others, and I guess more importantly, what I'm going to do in the future, where I'm going to go. And the only thing I could think about doing on one of those planes was jotting down a few of the thoughts that I had in the form of a letter to myself. I still remember writing on that Eastern stationery words that something go like this: today must mark a start, must mark a beginning, regardless of how small that beginning is. It must mark the time when each of us work for the brighter day that awaits us all. It marks a rededication to believing, to understanding, to optimism, and to God. But without His good graces, things could be much worse than they are now. They certainly could be much, much worse. Today, for me, must mark a rededication to the commitment to dream the dreams, to share the goals, and to work for that brighter day that all of us will have. Today, I must really begin to live. You know, after that experience, and after the experiences of countless numbers of you who've had similar types of things happen to you, it's easy to see that we've got to begin now to do the things in our lives that will make us successful in our quest to find the meaning in the best is yet to come. We've got to begin now in our quest to do the things in our FFA careers and in our everyday lives to be the kind of people we always dreamed we could be but haven't become. The best is yet to come, even with tribulation. Tribulation means grinding, like Henry Van Dyke says. And I suppose we must all go through it if we want the good flour to come with the wheat. The thing we have to learn to do now is to live so that the first volume will be good and the second will have the promise of being better. Let every person live now in light of the knowledge that we will all live forever. And FFA members, Yes, with your dedication to the future, with you rising to meet the challenges, and with you looking forward to tomorrow with optimism, the essence of our lives and the sharing that we have with others will live forever. For you, because of all those things, because of what you're doing here, because of what we've had the chance to do together this year and for the rest of our years, the best is yet to come.
The Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians that there is a glory that is beyond earthly glory, and it is waiting for us. In 1 Corinthians, Paul says, "But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the human heart conceived, what God has prepared for those who love him." Does death win in the end? Mike may not have known it, but the words that became his mantra, his way of living, would make a great sermon. Death is not the end of the story for those who know Christ, or said the way Mike would say it, the best is yet to come. My faith tells me that on September 20th, Mike experienced the best. We may not think so because we've lost him. We've lost husband, father, friend, churchman. But Paul tells us that we have nothing to fear, that no matter how we die or when or where, or no matter what be our physical condition at that moment, we have a promise from God that death itself cannot break. Mike has experienced the best that he dreamed of since he was a young man. Really, from the moments of his early faith development, from the moment of his baptism into Christ. And for that, I give thanks. Let us pray. O God, with confidence, we now entrust Mike to your unfailing love and overflowing goodness. Through the power that raised Christ from the dead to live eternally with you, lift up this your servant to life fulfilled beyond our imagining. Enfold him in your everlasting arms. Strengthen us, those left behind, to mourn. Turn our mourning into thanksgiving. Now may the peace of God and the fellowship of Christ our Redeemer and the Holy Spirit our Sustainer be with you and go with you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with kindness and give you peace. Amen.